next founder coming on, Savan Devani of Biotrillion, with a similar sort of focus, but in a more sort of a general way, but very much focused on what's in your pocket and providing a tool that you can use direct from your phone. Savan, are you there?
Yeah. Hi, Jerry. Good to be here.
Savan, great to have you on the program. It's a pleasure to have you on. We'd love to hear a little bit more about yourself, being again one of the finalists from one of our recent Breakthrough Alliance challenges, and how Biotrillion's Health AI platform, measuring biomarkers, um, is, um, is transforming the way that self-diagnosis is evolving.
Yeah. So, at our core, I paint this vision of what we call a digital doctor in your pocket. Um, most people I talk to believe that sometime in the near future or far future, everyone in the world will have a digital doctor in their pocket, serving as their 24/7 health co-pilot. Basically, you're in the way the average person goes about the health continuum. Uh, We get once a year centralized physical medical setting checkups, and then we're in the dark for 364 days a year. Something needs to take that gap, and that's what we're building. And I can get into much more details about that.
Yeah, we'd definitely love to hear more about sort of what this sort of means in terms of scaling healthcare across, especially globally, with something that's that can be used pretty much anywhere in the world. Especially, when we look at the way that diagnosis is done in the more sort of underserved and rural populations of the world as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So it all starts for us with the smartphone. We believe that uh, going forward, there'll be these one-off gadgets that measure single biomarkers, and if you're post-diagnosed, that makes sense. If you're on the pre-diagnosed side of the continuum, no one, I don't believe anyone's going to carry around five different gadgets, charge it, wear it. But we have seen the duration of the smartphone being the singular device that 5 billion people have and treat almost like their new limb. So that is that is our focus first. We start with what can 5 billion people measure right now? And then we look into anatomic areas. So we're primarily optical focused in modality. And we use the smartphone camera to measure multiple biomarkers clinically known in the face. For example, heart rate. We can now measure that from the face. There are other indicators, though, of your health from your face. There's pupil dilation, there's eye edema, there's even hand tremor. You're holding your phone. We already look at our phone 100 times a day. Compare that to the one time per year we're in a medical setting. It's just like magnitudes different. And so what healthcare effectively is a method of first measuring and then inferring, and that leads to detection or prediction. But that's basically it. It's measuring, inferring. We don't need to drive 50, 20, 30, sometimes 100 miles to a centralized place once a year for that to occur. I believe we can do that on our phone. So we have 10 biomarkers that span across the face into the neurocardio physiologic pathways. And then from that, just getting more into the future part of what we're going to do is we use that combinatorically, like a doctor does, right? They take all these inputs into their head and they think through it like a clinical decision support system, a most likely path that is inferring something about your health, whether it's currently or likely in the future. And that's the other branch of our platform.
No, that's fantastic. And we'd definitely love to hear more about sort of the future of where you're going with Biotrillion. But you mentioned about sort of an everyday sort of diagnosis or sort of self-diagnosis application for the platform, which could be done without having to visit a centralized sort of location, and that's obviously really super useful for the consumers and the patients who will use Biotrillion. But how does Biotrillion and sort of the healthy selfie um, application of it address more of the B2B vertical, sort of like looking at sort of how it serves the pharma and the telehealth and the payer
Yeah.
sort of audiences as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to make one clarification, we're not intending to diagnose. We're intending to early detect and monitor risks. So currently, we think of healthcare as really binary. If you're either in the dark, can use a personal example, um, no cancer, no cancer, no cancer, stage 4 cancer, right? This is not the way healthcare should be or uh, will be. And so, if we could bring those two things in a decentralized way to everyone's hand, measure and infer, we start to empower people with abilities that would only be exclusive to a centralized clinical environment. So, this centralized clinical environment that I'm talking about spans multiple sectors. Since you asked, the first part of our business is indeed B2B, and that is measure, give it to a clinician, and a clinician will do what they ordinarily do when if someone is in their physical presence. So largely vital signs. Right? The first thing a clinician does, whether you're going in for a clinical trial with pharma, um, a medical checkup with your provider, or even a medical exam with a life insurer, the first thing they do is they measure your vitals. Right now, they can't do that remotely. So let's just take telehealth. Telehealth today is no different than a phone call in 1962.
Hmm.
It's largely verbal. It's one way. It's symptomatic, not signs, and it's coming from patient to physician. Physician has no ability to measure the patient's vitals in a way that they can clinically make important change, impact their decision making. So we call that telehealth 2.0 when we now add the ability to say, hey, you're having a teledoc appointment on your phone. There's a button that says, click your healthy selfie. Doctor's going to be on the line in a minute. We take a 10-second healthy selfie and we measure 10 vitals and biomarkers within a minute that now can be presented to the doctor and presented in a way that's very informative, but also in the background measures other things that a doctor will never spend the time measuring. So, as an example, hand tremor, right? Well, we don't measure that anyway, right? But it's very indicative of lots of different conditions up to diseases. But we can measure hand tremor both in magnitude, but then also in frequency. And that's the type of sub biomarker data that we believe can complement the what do you get 10 minutes in a doctor's office these days. And so more or less the same is occurring in clinical trials where, they will pick endpoints um, really based on what is specific to the indication that they're talking about. So if it's, let's just say it's Alzheimer's, they'll literally, they need to recruit and they start the recruiting largely when everyone is herded into a centralized place. And then they have their primary endpoints, and a lot of those endpoints can be digitally measured now. And we can also stratify um, before they bring anyone in. So as an example, and this is a real one, we have a commercial partnership in pharma. Um, I can use this as example as Parkinson's. Um, they need to get 1,000 people that have Parkinson's. Largely, it's hard to differentiate oftentimes between the two types of dementias, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So people come in, then they get stratified, and that's very lengthy in time and costly in money. If we could measure something like hand tremor, plus a couple other biomarkers that are more specific to Parkinson's versus Alzheimer's, you can immediately screen 50% of that group and then have them come in for a more clinically confirmatory stratification and recruitment process. So
Yeah,
that's pharma, and then I'll just give you the one more, which is payers, which is I think the biggest market and is where we started in pharma, but we're going to go next to payers. If we just take the concept of life insurance, the first thing, if you have a very high value policy, the first thing a life insurer will do is say, you need a medical exam. And the first thing you do when you get a medical exam is they measure your vitals. And oftentimes the payer will pay the $500 for that visit if it's a very high value policy. But for 95% of the market who are getting, lower value policies, 500 or 250K and below, they don't want to pay for that medical exam. It eats into their margin. So how do they assess risk? They have people just go online and fill out a questionnaire. There are two issues with that. There's nothing physiologic necessarily being measured there. It's some things like credit score, age, gender. It's not 10 windows into your body. And so imagine if they could now get 2 or 3% more precise in their estimates on longevity based on clinically known markers that provide windows into the body. That is pure margin for the insurance industry. So those are the three markets that.
yeah, no, that's really excellent, Savan. Yeah, I think early detection. I misspoke earlier in terms of diagnosis. I think that sort of early detection and multiple ways of detection, I think, is super important to all of those different verticals and stuff. But Savan, thanks so much for coming on. Sorry we don't have more time to spend with you. It's really fascinating stuff what you're doing with Biotrillion, and I'd encourage the audience today to connect with you on LinkedIn and find out more about the great work that you're doing.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Savan.